Sri Rama. Krittivashi Ramayan or Krittivasa's Ramayana is the subject I'm supposed to speak on. But the way it was introduced to me during my childhood, I was not told it was a version or a tradition of Ramayana. I was just told this was Ramayana. And that is, I guess, how all children in our beautiful country are introduced to Ramayana. Parents or teachers do not tell them this is a version or this is a tradition. They do not even mention sometimes Valmiki. They just say Ramayana. And all this while, I did not know it was Krittivash Ramayana. I thought this was Ramayana. This is how things were going on. When I was in class 5, Sanskrit was introduced to us. We had a Dubeji as our teacher. And interestingly, he did not narrate Ramayana from the Valmiki Ramayana. He used Ramcharitmanas instead. And it was early 80s. As the story progressed, I found certain things amiss because I was well versed with a different tradition of Ramayana. And then at times I would raise my hand and said, no, this is not what happened, this had happened. It would create a consternation in the class. Today I'll present to you 20 different deviations from Valmiki's tradition and some inspirations also because Krittivash Ojha was born in 1381. He predated Tulsidasa by more than a century. And Tulsidasa at some point acknowledges having read Krittivash Ramayana as well. So how does it start? These 20 variations that I spoke of, some are minor variations, minor deviations, but there are others that are major deviations. So when we come to the major deviations, that is where I'll read out from the text of Krittivash. Otherwise, my presentation will be in English. So one is among the minor deviations or minor additions even. For example, the father of Dasharatha, Aja. Aja's marriage is described in Krittivash Ramayana. It's not there in Valmiki Ramayana. So, Aja's marriage with Indumati. Then the sudden death of Aja, followed by Dasharatha's premature coronation. Why Dasharatha had to be coronated, had to be announced the next king prematurely, also has been described. Then the 3 marriages of Dasharatha, one with Kaushalya, then Kaikeyi, and then Sumitra, each described separately. Friendship with Jatayu, Dasharatha's friendship with Jatayu, Rama's friendship with Guhak, and especially the background of friendship is very detailed. And how did this all come about? Krittivash was from a family that was already religious. His grandfather, Murari Ojha, and his father, Bonomali Ojha. If I pronounce it in the Hindi way, it will be Vanmali, Bonomali Ojha. They were both learned in the scriptures. But when he attained about 12 years of age, they thought that the kind of education they had imparted to their child was not enough. He should go to a higher Gurukula. So at the age of 12, Krittivash travels and takes Diksha from Barendra Brahman. As you know, there are different kulas of Brahmins, like you have Kanyakubja Brahmin, you have Saraswat Brahmin. In Bengal, there is Barendra Brahman. So he took further training in the scriptures from Barendra Brahmins, and then he moved towards North Bengal. Remember, he was born, there is some dispute about his exact place of birth. It was a village called Phulia. Now, there is a village Phulia in Nodia district. There is also a village Phulia in Rajshahi district, which is now in Bangladesh. So either way, he moved towards the north. The Gauda kings used to rule then in Bengal. There was Ganesha Gauda, the king then, and he had heard a lot about the training and scholarship of Krittibash. He invited him in the court and asked him to recite the Ramayana. And that is when people realized, the audience realized, that it was not just an inspiration from Valmiki Ramayana, but there were also variations and additions as well. So, what are those biggest or minor and major deviations? First, I start with something which is just of academic interest. Balakanda in Krittibash Ramayana is Adi Kanda. It is not called Balakanda. So just name change. And Yuddha Kanda is Lanka Kanda. These are two changes in the names. Second difference, it also details the story of Raja Harishchandra. You know, it's like the Ikshvaku Vangsha were the custodians of truth. It came down from generations after generations after generations, finally to Maryada Purushottama Rama. And this is another detail that you wouldn't find in the Valmiki Ramayana. The third difference is the marriage of Dashratha with Kaushalya and Kaikeyi and Sumitra, as I said, are quite elaborate. And according to Krittibash, Kaushalya and Sumitra's marriage with Dashratha, these two marriages were arranged by his parents. But Kaikeyi was won over in a Swayamvara, according to Krittibash. The fourth difference, how Dashratha became a friend of Jatayu. On an occasion, Jatayu saved Dashratha's life, and the king accepted him as friend. So, once there was a drought, a famine in Ayodhya, and Dashratha wondered what was going wrong, whether the gods were not happy, and he was told by Vasishtha that Shani is not happy with you. Shani is not happy with your kingdom. You need to please Shani. So he rises atop his chariot and moves toward Shani. And then Shani watches him coming from a distance. Shani is concerned too. Because if Shani Drishti falls on Dasharatha, he'll burn. So therefore, Shani moves his gaze towards the chariot, as a result of which the chariot is reduced to ashes, and Dashratha starts falling from the skies. That is when Jatayu saves him, and that is how they become friends. That was the fourth difference. Fifth difference, the birth of Ganesha and the story that we have heard about it, about how he acquired the elephant head. We know that he was created or conceived in the absence of Shiva. And Parvati or Mata was going to bathe. She needed a guard, a custodian there. And when Shiva came in, Ganesha did not allow him to enter. And that is when, after an argument, Shiva threw his Trishula, trident, and that is how Ganesha lost his original head. And then, of course, the story follows how a baby elephant, towards whom the mother elephant was not looking, was picked up, and then that head was transplanted. But in Krittibash Ramayana, it is not Shiva, but Shani who destroys Ganesha's original head. This is another deviation. The sixth deviation is how Kaushalya, Kaikeyi, and Sumitra conceive. And this again is, it is not quite a variation. It is a different way of looking at things. When first Kaushalya and Kaikeyi devour the kheer that was given to them by the rishis, they suddenly discover there was some share to be kept for Sumitra, which they forgot. And then they both shared whatever was left in the utensil with Sumitra. And Krittiba says that the words of Kaushalya and Kaikeyi were different while sharing. So Kaushalya tells Sumitra, take this part which I have left over. Your son will follow my son. Your son will follow mine. Whereas when Kaikeyi gives her share, she says, your son will be my son's servant. So there is a difference. So the relationship between Rama and Lakshmana and the relationship between Bharata and Shatrughna are a bit different, a bit nuanced but different. Lakshmana is a follower of Rama, whereas Shatrughna serves Bharata. Of course, there is bonhomie between all the brothers, as we know about so many famous instances in their lives when one was ready to sacrifice everything for the other siblings. The next difference is the seventh difference. That is, how did the Shivadhanu arrive in Mithila? And here Krittiba says that it is Parashurama who was the custodian of the Shivadhanu, and even he had plans or wishes or desire to marry Sita. But he gave the bow, Shivadhanu, to Janaka, saying, before I return, if you find an able match for Sita, hand over Sita to him, otherwise she is mine. This is another deviation in Krittiva's Ramayana. And this was, of course, Krittiba says that Parashurama had got that bow from Shiva himself. The next difference is again very peculiar, and this is why my argument with my Sanskrit teacher had started, because it is very early in the story where Vishwamitra comes to Ayodhya seeking the help of Rama and Lakshmana. And Krittiba says that all the four brothers look alike. And Dasharatha has a soft corner for his eldest son, especially. Of course, he loves all his children, but he has a soft corner. So he tries to deceive Vishwamitra by saying, take these two kids along. He gives away Bharata and Shatrughna. Vishwamitra figures out there is something amiss. On the way, he tells these two children, there are two ways of reaching my Yagyashala. One is a short way, paved with danger. At every point, Rakshasas will attack you. There is a longer detour. You can reach there that way also, absolutely peaceful, but it will take a very long time. So, I am not insinuating anything. This is what Krittivash wrote, that Bharat and Shatrughna chose the longer route. And Vishwamitra immediately made out this cannot be Rama. So then he comes back furious to Ayodhya and says, how dare you cheat me like this? This can no way be Sri Rama. And then, of course, Sri Rama steps forward and tries to pacify Vishwamitra also. Says, just please consider, be considerate to a father's emotions. I am here, I'm ready to go with you. So that was the 8th variation. In the 9th variation, this was interesting, although a minor change. When the wedding of all the brothers is arranged, since Vasishtha was the Kula Guru, So Dashratha asks him to fix an auspicious moment for that. Now Vashishta makes such an accurate and precise calculation that these 4 marriages can never fail. The couples will never separate. Gods get very worried. You know, if couples don't separate, there will be no Ramayana. You know, the entire abduction of Sita will not take place. So then they approach Vashishta, pleading with him, please do something. And then he employs a little trick, says, all right, since the eldest brother must marry first, he will get married moments before the other sons of Dasharatha get married. And therefore, the wedding of Rama and Sita precede that of other brothers, respectively, with Mandavi, Urmila, and Shrutakriti. And therefore, by missing the few moments, that separation of Rama and Sita is ordained. So this is another variation. The 10th variation in the Aranya Kanda, when Lakshmana leaves Sita alone in the cottage, we have all heard, there were scholars yesterday who said that Lakshmana Rekha does not appear in Valmiki Ramayana. It is true. So where does it come from? It comes from Krittibash Ramayana. So Krittibash made this variation in the story that at a certain point, when Marich dies, bellowing out a cry which resembles the voice of Rama. And it pleads with Lakshmana, please save me. And then Sita gets very restless. She keeps poking her brother-in-law. What kind of a brother are you? You say you are a follower of Sri Rama. Why don't you rush to the spot? And Lakshmana keeps pleading, it is impossible for any ordinary Rakshasa to overpower Rama. We had already warned you that this golden deer was actually not real. It was a maya of a Rakshas. You did not hear. And if it's a Rakshas, very clearly Sri Rama has killed him. If it has got caught, or if it has got caught and it was really a deer, he will bring back the skin which you so desired. And then Sita gets more and more restless. She starts insinuating that, were you waiting for this opportunity for your brother to disappear? That pinches Lakshman very hard. He cannot take that anymore, and he says, all right, I'm leaving, but please do not cross this rekha. So some people say that this does not appear even in Tulsidasa's Ramacharitmanas, but it does. Not here, much later. Much later, when Ravana's defeat in the hands of Sri Rama and his slaying is inevitable, Mandodari tries to counsel Ravana, saying he was up against the impossible. There was no way you could overpower Sri Rama when you could not even cross a line drawn by a mere human. That is where Tulsidas Ramayana indirectly points towards Lakshmana Rekha. I'll read out the lines. It is Kanta Samuchi Man Tahu Kumatihi Sohana Samar Tumahi Rahupatihi Ramanuj Laghu Rekh Khachai. Ramanuj, Ram ke Anuj, Ram ke छोटे भाई. Ramanuj Laghu Rekh Khachai Sau nahi lagheyu Asimanusai. A mere human drew a line and you couldn't cross it, and you're going to fight Sri Rama. So this is where there is an indirect reference to the Lakshmana Rekha. Now, that was the 10th difference. The 11th difference is, after he is insulted by Ravana, Vibhishana meets his elder brother Kubera at Kailasha. And both Kubera and Shiva advise him to join Rama's force. Here, Kubera is described as a friend of Shiva. This also does not appear in Valmiki Ramayana. The 12th difference is a major difference, and this is what Anupama ji was referring to in her introduction, that the entire Lanka army, all Rakshasas also are bhaktas of Sri Rama. This is a big, big deviation, and hence I would like to point out three differences. Three different Rakshasas who were bhaktas of Rama. One of them happens to be Vibhishana's son. And Vibhishana actually does not reveal it to Rama before he gets killed, before his son gets killed, because otherwise Rama would hesitate to take this extreme action. But much before that, look at the rest of the ordinary Rakshasas, how much in awe of Sri Rama they are in. And when they get the news that Rama's army has arrived in Lanka, a few of the Rakshasas climb atop the walls to check how big the army is. And here, again and again and again, you will hear a phrase, Sahasra Koti, 1,000 crores. And this is how Rakshasa Shuka and Sarana describe the size and might of Rama's army to Ravana while sitting atop a wall of Lanka. Chaturdike jal sthal byapito banor. Wherever we look in all four directions, Chaturdik. Chaturdike jal sthal, we either see water or we see some land, and everywhere there are vanaras. Dekhiya Ravon Raja Shabhay Antar. Looking at this, Ravana is terrified from within. He is petrified. Sahasra Batshar kori juddho nirantar, tathapi na phuraibe katok bistar. They tell their king, if you keep fighting for 1,000 years, even then you cannot get over this army. Banor chinite chahe Raja Dashanon, tuliya dokkhin hasto dekhaye sharon. So then Ravana says, please introduce me to these vanaras one by one. And he makes a gesture with his right hand, and Sharana begins. Banor sahasra koti, jahar sanghati, oi dekho nil borno nil senapati. So Nil, you already know that when Rama and his army had to cross the ocean, then Nal and Nil had helped them by making stones float on, rocks float on the ocean, and then on every stone, Ramanam was written, which made them float. I'm not getting into that, but this is the introduction of Nila by Sarana to Ravana. So, Nil Senapati she helaye jodi nore, dadosh prohor path shoinyo are shore. So, Nil is such a Senapati, such a commander, that if he just moves a little, you will be demolished. This is, look at a very minor, low-ranked Rakshasa saying this to Ravana. That Nil is such a commander, if he just moves a little, you will be demolished. Banor 70 koti jar pichu lage, Sugriv Bhupati dekho, Shriramer age. 70 koti, 70 crores. And Sugriva is a commander of 70 crore infantry. That is the introduction of Sugriva. 20 koti kopi shaho oi je Gabaksha. You have heard of Gavaksha. So Gavaksha is, he commands an army of 20 crore. 30 koti banorete dekho Dhumraksha. So there is Dhumraksha also, another commander. He commands an infantry of 30 crores. Sampati banor dekho Gauro Borno dhore. Rone gele bipokho palaye jar dore. Sampati is another Sampati is another Vanara commander, and he is very fair complexioned, Gauro Borno. And when he enters the battlefield, the enemy flees out of fear. হিঙ্গুলি পর্বতের হিঙ্গুল যেন অঙ্গ পঞ্চাশত কোটি কপি সঙ্গে সরভঙ্গ. Now, Sarabhanga is described is হিঙ্গুলি পর্বতের হিঙ্গুল যেন অঙ্গ. His body resembles that of a mountain. পঞ্চাশত কোটি 500 crores, পঞ্চাশত কোটি কপি স্বরে সরভঙ্গ. And it goes on and on and on. So it's a long part. I'll cut it short. Sarana finally concludes the description of the army by saying what Sri Ram is and how mighty Sri Rama is. So this part is the most important in this section. Shotokoti banorete ek brindo goni. Shotokoti 100 crores. If 100 crore vanaras are brought together, that unit is called one vrinda. শতকোটি বৃন্দে এক মহাবৃন্দ হয়. If you bring 100 crore vrindas, you get one mahavrinda. শতকোটি মহাবৃন্দে অর্বুদ নিশ্চয়. When you bring 100 crore mahavrinda, you get arbuda. And again, it goes on and on. When you bring 100 crore maharbuddha, arbuda, you get one maharbuddha. You get 100 crore maharbuddha, you get a kharba. Then 100 crore kharva, one mahakharva. 100 crore mahakharva is shankha. And 100 crore shankha is one mahashankha. 100 crore mahashankha is one padma. 100 crore padma is one mahapadma. And 100 crore mahapadma is an ocean. 100 crore oceans is a massive ocean. And 100 crore massive oceans is one akshauhini. And after 100 crore Akshauhini, which is called Apar, there is nothing more, no word coined to describe the amount, and Sri Rama is bigger than that. That is Sarana describing Sri Rama to Ravana. So this is such a major deviation and also addition. I would say a value addition to Ramayana telling. And particularly there are 3 Rakshasas, including Ravana, who sing praises to Rama before they find out that this is going to take us nowhere, because then if we praise Rama, unka man pasij jayega. His heart will melt. They'll not kill us. We will not attain moksha. So there is a Bhasma Lochana. So Bhasma Lochana, whatever he looks at turns into Bhasma. Then this is described elaborately in Krittivas Ramayana, where when Rama comes before Bhasma Lochana, he comes marked with Darpanastra. Darpan Astra, mirror weapon. So when Bhasmalochana casts his glance on Rama, he looks at the mirror, gets burnt himself. That is one. Then I had already mentioned the son of Vibhishana. I'll come to that. There is also Makaraksha, son of Khara. Khara is the Rakshasa who had challenged Sri Rama and Lakshmana after Surpanakha was humiliated. So Khara's son is Makaraksha. So what he does is he employs another trick. He comes with his chariot loaded with cows. Now Sri Rama cannot hurt cows. So as a result, Sri Rama devises a new strategy. He uses Pavanastra. When Pavanastra, Pavan Astra, Astra of wind, is hurled, all the cows are blown away and only Makaraksha remains. And then Makaraksha gets killed. Then there is Tarani Sen, the son of Vibhishana I was talking about. Coming to the battlefield, he starts singing Stuti of Sri Rama. And Sri Rama's heart is melted. And then Tarani Sinha said, oh, I made a mistake because this battle is not going to end now. So then, on purpose, he starts abusing Sri Rama. And that is how his end comes about. And that is, after that, uh, Vibhishana reveals that he was none other than my son. And Sri Rama is crestfallen. He's very sad at having killed his bhakta. Veerabahu is another character. He was another one who had sung Stuti of Rama in the beginning, and then he moved on to deliberate abuses so that he gets killed. And in the next change, I'll also come to the Stuti of Ravana, of Rama, how Ravana sings Stuti of Rama, which is a very telling and very moving image, but that will come in the end. In the Shakti Shel episode, Ravana gets the weapon from his father-in-law, Mayadanava, and Ravana invokes it after Indrajit's death. This part sticks to Valmiki's narration, but Sushena, the Vaidya, is not someone brought from Lanka to rescue Lakshmana. Sushena is the Vaidya of Kishkindha, Naresh. That is a deviation here. The 14th deviation is after Hanuman kills Kalnemi, worried Ravana says that now somehow this has to stop. So he invokes Surya. And Surya, because if Surya comes, the time given by Sushena was before the next sunrise, you must be able to revive Lakshmana. Hanuman catches the sight of Surya trying to rise. He again confronts him and says, do you remember what I had done to you in my childhood? You want me to repeat that? Surya says, hey, that gives me an idea because see, I am scared of Ravana. If Ravana says why my order was not executed, I cannot answer him. So do one thing, please repeat your act that you had done in the childhood. I'll get an excuse saying that, well, I was on the way to carry out your instruction, but this Hanuman came in the way. What can I do? So this is another variation. And the meeting of Hanuman with Bharata on the way when he was going to the Gandhamadan Parvat, that also is slightly different here because when he is struck by Bharata's bow and he falls down, then both Vashishta and Hanuman scold Bharata. And for the remaining part of the journey, it is Bharata's arrow that carries Hanuman to his destination. That is a difference. And then at the mountain, Gandhamadan Parvat, there were several Gandharvas guarding that place, whom he had to turn unconscious, and with the same Mrita Sanjeevani, after he had lifted the mountain, he revived all of them. The 17th difference is Mahiravan, Ahiravan. Here, the difference is that Ahiravan is a son of Mahiravan, not brother. That is a difference. And in Uttarakanda, this is another part where there was a debate with my Sanskrit teacher, and also again when I went to Kolkata for higher studies, I found that the entire state did not agree with Ramanand Sagar's Ramayana. That was because Lava-Kusha are absolutely victorious in the Ashwamedha part, and they even turn Sri Rama unconscious, and Valmiki revives him. This is very different, and it may sound outrageous to some people, but it is not me saying it, it is Krittivas saying it. And then in the time when Sita was in Valmiki ashram, Shatrughna hears Ramanama coming from somewhere, and he figures out some children are chanting the name, but he cannot see anyone. So this is, he becomes emotional. He asks Valmiki, but Valmiki dodges the question. He does not answer. Then finally, this is something which you have to give me time for, is the unique thing about Bengali culture, their greatest festival, Durga Puja. Where does this come from? It comes from Akal Bodhon. Durga was invoked at a time when she was not supposed to be invoked. But after doing her worship, Ravana requests her to accompany him in his chariot. And when there is Ma on the chariot, Rama cannot hurt him. So Rama cannot hurt him, then Brahma gives him the idea that please start singing Stuti of Ma. And he says, I'll do better than that. He makes a sankalpa of offering puja with 108 lotuses. And Devi Durga, Mayavi that she is, steals one of the lotuses from there. And Sri Rama employs the entire Vanar Sena to find the lotus and nowhere it can be found. Finally, he says that, okay, people say, I am Padma Lochana. My eyes resemble the lotus, so I'll donate my eyes. So this is the one I was referring to. Bhabite bhabite Ram korilen mone, Nil Kamalakho more, bole Sharbojone. Everybody calls me Kamalaksha. Jugol Noyon mor phullo nilotpal, Sankalpa koribo purno bujibe সকল। এক চক্ষু দিব আমি দেবীর চরণে, এত বলি কহে রাম অনুজ লক্ষণে। So this is the part is he tells Lakshmana, I'll give away one of my eyes in Devi's name. আর কি বা দেখো ভাই কি করি এখন, না হইল দুর্গার কৃপা বিফল জীবন। If Durga does not do kripa, this jivan is vifal. So I have no other way out. So this goes on, and look at the beauty of our faith, our belief system. Here, it is unfortunate that some people who have not gone into the depths, engage in Vaishnava versus Shaiva versus Shakta fights. But here you look at the mutual respect of Rama and Durga for each other. I'll not read the full thing, only that part. Shayanno kalete Ram korila bodhon, amantron অভরায় বিল্লাদি বাসন। And চক্ষু উপারিতে রাম বসিল সাক্ষাতে, he was almost going to pluck out his eyes. হেনকালে কাত্যায়নী ধরিলেন হাতি, কাত্যায়নী emerges and holds his hand. কি করো প্রভু জগৎ গোসাই? What are you doing, Jagat Gosai? Purna hoilo chokhu upariya karjo nai. Your sankalpa is purna now. There is no need to pluck out your eye. So there is one very short part, a few couplets by Ravana, because I had said that part is very important, where Ravana himself sings Stuti of Rama. So that part is when he is already in the death throes. He has been struck by the bow, he's about to die, and Sri Rama tells Lakshmana, please take lessons of Rajniti from Ravana, because, right after our coronation, which was about to happen, we were exiled. All these 14 years, we have roamed around in jungles. I do not know Rajniti. Please learn Rajniti from somebody who knows it. And then Ravan says, in brief, you can say that what the crux of what Ravana said was only that who am I to teach you who is everything, who does not merely know everything, who is everything. But this is quite a different tradition of Ramayana, which I think many of you, both scholars and commoners alike, and interested students, would like to dive into and find out how the subsequent generations of Bengal, at least for 3 or 4 centuries, was so steeped in Bhakti Rasa. Fortunately, amidst all the political turmoil, once again, it is so heartening to see that the Hindu Tattva, the Rama Tattva, is reviving in Bengal, thanks to Krittivas Ramayan. Jai Sri Rama.